who decided this is $150.
Yeah.
Like, I'm holding it right now, and it is literally just a piece of polyester.
A very expensive piece of polyester.
Right. With, like, a heat press logo on it. But I paid full retail for it yesterday. I mean, I pay full retail every 4 years. And I'm finally just staring at this fabric. Like, how did we arrive at $150?
Well, it's kind of the universal fan experience, right? You stand in the store, the adrenaline of the tournament is pumping. Um, you look at the price tag, you feel this brief, sharp moment of existential dread. And then
You just hand over your credit card anyway.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because you want to be part of it.
Yeah, I mean, the World Cup is happening literally right now, summer 2026. The watch party is tonight, and I refuse to be the one guy sitting there in a plain gray T-shirt.
Yeah.
I am fully aware that someone is making an absolute killing off my fear of missing out, but, I buy it anyway.
And tens of millions of people are making that exact same calculation right this second. I mean, we're talking about 48 teams, 104 games spread across the U.S., Canada, and Mexico.
It's massive.
It is a massive economic engine. Retailers have reportedly committed to, 40% more product volume than they did for the Qatar tournament in 2022. So our mission for this deep dive today is to actually trace that engine.
I am so ready for this.
We are going to take your $150, or the $100 for the standard fan version, and follow it from your wallet backward through the global supply chain. We want to uncover the financial story of this shirt that nobody ever tells you.
I definitely need to know who is pocketing my money, because I'm assuming Nike and Adidas aren't just hoarding the entire pile in some cartoonish vault, right?
Right. But before we tear into the global retail economy, I know we have to set some parameters on the data we're actually looking at today, just so everyone listening understands our baseline.
Yeah, let's get the compliance out of the way.
Exactly. So before we get into the margins, I have to clarify that we aren't financial advisors, and we certainly don't have access to the secret internal accounting documents of these major brands. The numbers we're going to break down are industry estimates.
They're based on publicly available data, right?
Yes, publicly available supply chain data and financial reports. So you should consider these figures as highly educated approximations. Also, any specific brands we mention are purely for educational context to help you understand the market, not endorsements.
Okay, baseline established. So we have to start at the physical origin of the shirt. Because to understand the markup, I feel like we need to know what it actually costs to manifest this thing into reality.
Right. What's your hypothesis?
Well, you've got the physical elements, the raw recycled plastic, the factory labor, getting onto a massive cargo ship. I mean, it can't be more than, $20? And honestly, even that feels a little high for global mass production.
Yeah, you're overshooting it by more than double.
Wait, seriously? Under $10?
Yeah. Based on available supply chain breakdowns from industry researchers, for a standard replica fan jersey that retails for around $100, the total manufacturing cost is approximately $9.50.
$9.50.
Oh.
Okay. I mean, I knew it would be low, but coming in under $10 is jarring. I am paying a 15x multiplier for a shirt.
It's a huge markup.
If I order a $10 craft beer and the bartender charges me $150 just because he served it in a branded glass, I'm walking out of the bar. How do they justify this?
Well, it feels egregious when you look at it purely as a physical object. That $9.50 covers the recycled polyester, the labor in the factory, which is usually located in Asia, the physical printing of the crest, and the shipping across the ocean to a distribution center in North America or Europe.
That's a lot of steps for $9.
It is. The efficiency of the global supply chain is mathematically staggering, but that physical manufacturing cost is just the tiny visible tip of the iceberg. The rest of your money is basically funding an invisible ecosystem.
Let's map that ecosystem then. Because if 90% of the price tag is invisible, I really want to know who's standing in the shadows taking a cut. Let's stick with the $100 fan jersey just to keep the math perfectly clean.
That's good.
So after the $9.50 for the factory, who gets the very first slice when I tap my card at the register?
The very first entity gets paid before the shirt even leaves the counter, and they do not care about soccer at all.
The government.
Yep. Depending on your region, taxes or VAT take roughly 15% right off the top. So $15 out of your 100 is gone immediately.
Standard cost of doing business. So we're at roughly $24.50 between the physical creation and the tax man. That leaves over $75 floating around. Who is taking the biggest piece of that?
Well, who do you think?
My guess would be the brand itself. Like Nike or Adidas must be taking half of it.
That is a super common assumption, but it's actually incorrect. The single largest slice of the entire breakdown goes to the retailer.
Wait, really? The physical store.
Yeah, the physical brick-and-mortar store or the e-commerce platform that sells you the shirt takes approximately 42%. $42 out of your 100.
Hang on. The middleman who literally takes the shirt out of a cardboard box and puts it on a plastic hanger gets 4 times more money than the factory that actually built the product. That seems wildly disproportionate.
It sounds disproportionate until you look at the mechanics of retail economics. A 42% gross margin for a retailer is, it's pretty standard, and they genuinely need it to survive.
Because of the overhead.
Exactly. Think about what a physical store has to carry. They're paying premium rent for high foot traffic real estate, paying local staff, keeping the lights on, and most importantly, they are carrying massive inventory risk.
Oh, right. The inventory risk with sports apparel is completely unique because it's tied to unpredictable live events.
Exactly.
If I'm a retailer and I stock up on 10,000 jerseys for a powerhouse team,
Ah.
and then they suffer a catastrophic upset and get knocked out in the group stage.
Consumer demand drops to zero overnight.
Wow, yeah. The retailer's just left holding the bag.
They really are. They have to mark those thousands of jerseys down to clearance prices just to get them off the floor, which absolutely destroys their margin. Plus, they pay slotting fees to warehouses and logistics companies, so that $42 isn't pure profit.
It's the operational cost of making sure the exact shirt I want is available in my exact size the very moment I decide to buy it.
Okay.
I can see the logic there.
Right. They absorb the financial risk of the tournament's unpredictability.
But if the retailer takes $42 and taxes take 15 and making it cost $9.50, what does the actual brand make?
The brand's net unit margin, so the portion Nike or Adidas keeps on each individual shirt after their own overhead, is approximately 18%. So $18 on that $100 shirt.
$18 per shirt seems strangely modest for a global conglomerate until, of course, you remember the scale.
Yep. The scale is everything.
If they're selling tens of millions of units globally during a World Cup cycle, that $18 compounds into an absolute fortune.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And it aligns perfectly with their broader corporate health. If you look at early 2026 financial reports, Nike's overall company gross margin hovers around 40%, and Adidas sits at roughly 51%.
So they're doing just fine.
Oh, they're doing great. So let's tally up your receipt. We have $9.50 for manufacturing, $15 for taxes, $42 for the retailer, and $18 for the brand. We're sitting at $84.50. There's a missing $15.50.
Right. Where's the rest of my money going?
About $5 of that remaining chunk goes to miscellaneous domestic distribution, getting the shirt from a regional warehouse onto the specific local delivery truck. But the remaining $10.50,
Yeah.
that is allocated to marketing and licensing. And this specific slice reveals the true genius of the modern sports economy.
Marketing and licensing.
Yeah.
So paying for the billboard campaigns, the glossy television commercials. But licensing is the key word there, isn't it? That's the cost of the logo.
It is. That 10.5% covers the astronomical fees the brand pays to the National Football Federations just for the right to use their crest.
It's got to be a massive number.
To really understand how massive this mechanism is, look at the deal struck in December 2024 between Nike and the Brazilian Football Federation, the CBF.
Okay.
They locked in a new agreement that runs all the way to 2038. According to reports, Nike pays Brazil $100 million every single year.
Wait, $100 million a year?
Yeah.
Just for the permission to print the Brazilian crest next to the Nike swoosh.
Every single year. And under this new deal, for the very first time, Brazil also earns royalties on actual jersey sales on top of that base fee.
That's insane.
That single licensing deal makes the Brazilian Federation more money than many of their domestic sponsors combined.
Okay, this is the paradigm shift for me. If Nike is willing to pay $100 million annually just to associate their brand with the national team, Nike isn't an apparel company. They don't sew shirts. They are an identity licensing firm.
That is exactly what they are. They are monetizing human connection.
It's like buying a passport. When you pay $150 for this jersey, you aren't paying for advanced moisture-wicking technology. You are paying a toll.
A toll for identity.
Yes,
Yeah.
You are paying the governing body for a cultural passport that grants you entry into a specific tribe. You put this shirt on, walk into a crowded pub, and 100 strangers instantly recognize that you belong to them. The brands know they hold the keys to that feeling, and they realize they can charge an astronomical premium for access.
The passport analogy is absolutely perfect. And because the brands know they control access to that identity, they've built a system that completely eliminates traditional free market competition.
How so?
Well, Nike and Adidas essentially operate as a global duopoly in soccer. If you look at the 2026 tournament, just like in Qatar in 2022, those two brands outfit the vast majority of the teams. They basically split an $11 billion FIFA financial cycle between them,
So the illusion of consumer choice is completely dead.
pretty much.
If I'm a diehard fan of a specific country, I don't get to cross-shop. I can't compare the Nike version of my team's shirt to, like, an Under Armour version to see who offers better stitching or a more competitive price.
Exactly. Competition does not happen at the cash register. The retail price is essentially fixed across the entire market. The real competition happened 5 or 10 years earlier, in a boardroom, when these brands were outbidding each other to lock up the federation crests.
Wow.
Yeah, by the time the shirt hits the store rack, you, the consumer, have absolutely zero leverage. If you want the authentic symbol of your team, you pay their toll.
That makes incredible business sense for the executives at the top. But it has to create a dark economic reality at the bottom of the chain.
It does.
Because if Nike is guaranteeing Brazil $100 million a year, and the retailer demands a 42% margin to survive, and the brand fiercely protects its $18 cut, there is immense pressure to keep that physical manufacturing cost pinned at $9.50. The squeeze has to happen somewhere.
The squeeze happens exactly where you'd expect, at the factory level. When you look closely at who bears the brunt of that economic pressure, the reality is sobering. Documented reporting from organizations like the New York Times and various labor advocates have investigated garment workers producing World Cup apparel.
What did they find?
They found that in certain manufacturing hubs, like Myanmar, workers have earned less than $3 a day. Production is heavily concentrated in lower-wage centers across Vietnam, Indonesia, and China precisely because the margins at the top demand it.
$3 a day. That is the uncomfortable truth of globalized commerce right there. If a garment worker is making $3 for an entire day of labor, and they are sewing dozens of these shirts in a single shift, it forces you to look at your closet differently.
It really does.
We can marvel at brilliant $100 million licensing deals, but we can't willfully ignore the human cost required to maintain those margins.
And it's not just a labor squeeze, there is an environmental squeeze happening simultaneously.
Yeah.
The major brands actively promote their use of recycled polyester, and, pulling plastic out of the ocean is genuinely positive.
Sure, yeah.
But if we look at the mechanics of the system, it's still fundamentally flawed. These synthetic jerseys shed microplastics into the water system every single time they go through a washing machine. They carry a massive carbon footprint from being shipped globally.
Plus, the brands artificially engineer a fast fashion cycle.
Oh, absolutely.
They deliberately design and push a brand new home and away kit every 2 years. They intentionally tweak the color or the stripe width to render last year's shirt socially obsolete.
Right, they want you to feel out of date.
They force fans to buy the new one just to prove their loyalty is current. It is the psychology of fast fashion, but operating at luxury price points.
That's exactly how the mechanism works. Social obsolescence drives sales volume.
Now, for anyone listening, I want to be incredibly clear. We are not bringing this up to shame you. I literally started this conversation holding a jersey I just bought. We aren't trying to guilt trip anyone or cancel these brands because the global supply chain is incredibly complex.
It's very complex.
But if you're going to spend your hard-earned money, understanding how the system operates is the only way to be a grown-up consumer. You have to see the whole board.
Seeing the whole board is what gives you power. Knowledge is only useful when you apply it to your own life. So, knowing about the 15 times markup, the duopoly, the labor squeeze, and the artificially engineered fast fashion cycle, how do you navigate this? How do you support your team without feeling like a pawn in a corporate game?
That is the $150 question. I still want to wear my team's colors. I still want the cultural passport. What is the practical playbook here?
It starts with understanding the product tiers. When you walk into a store, you generally face two options: the authentic player jersey and the replica fan jersey.
Right.
For the 2026 cycle, the authentic sits around $150 to $160. The replica is usually priced between $100 and $110.
Which, let's be honest, both feel significantly more expensive than they used to be.
You aren't imagining that. Both tiers are roughly 12 to 16% more expensive than their equivalents from the Qatar tournament just 4 years ago. Inflation plays a role, but it's also a stress test to see exactly what the market will bear.
Oh, for sure.
But the $50 gap between the two versions is where you can make a highly strategic choice.
My assumption is the authentic is exactly what the athletes wear on the pitch, right? Like the highly engineered athletic gear.
Correct. The authentic features laser-cut ventilation, heat-pressed badges to reduce weight, and high-end moisture-wicking technology. It is a piece of elite athletic equipment designed for peak physical performance.
And the replica?
The replica, on the other hand, is designed specifically for the stands. The badges are usually embroidered so they last longer in the wash, the fit is a bit looser and more forgiving, and the fabric is a standard athletic weave.
Okay, applying real-world logic to this.
Mm.
If I buy the authentic, I am paying a $50 premium for aerodynamic heat-pressed badges and elite moisture-wicking tech, just so I can sit on a bar stool and inevitably spill buffalo sauce on it.
Oh.
That is a terrible misallocation of funds.
It is a terrible return on investment. For the vast majority of fans going to watch parties, sitting in stadiums, or hanging out at a local pub, the replica is virtually identical in look and feel.
You get the exact same social currency.
Exactly. You get the exact same passport into the tribe, but you keep $50 in your pocket.
It's all about buying with intention. This entire deep dive has completely reframed how I look at the physical items I own. It's not just a shirt anymore. It's an economic case study.
When you trace the money, it always is. What do you think are the biggest shifts in your thinking after mapping all this out?
First, the realization that price is never equal to cost. The gap between that $9 physical creation and the $150 price tag exists everywhere, in sneakers, in electronics, and cosmetics.
Right.
Understanding why that gap exists and identifying all the middlemen taking a slice is a financial superpower. It breaks the illusion. It stops you from blindly accepting a price tag as an indicator of physical quality.
Absolutely. Once you see the markup, you start evaluating a product based on what it actually does for you rather than what the brand tells you it's worth. What else stands out?
The sheer brilliance of the licensing model. The Nike in Brazil deal proves that the most valuable asset in modern business isn't the physical product. It's the intellectual property.
It really is.
If you can build an identity or lock down a cultural symbol that people care deeply about, you don't even have to manufacture anything yourself. You just charge other people for the privilege of accessing your audience.
That is the ultimate business mode. Build the asset, rent the access. And the final piece.
That being a conscious consumer doesn't mean you have to abstain from the things you love. I don't have to stop watching the World Cup or supporting my team,
Of course not.
but I can choose the replica over the authentic. I can refuse to buy a new kit every 2 years and just wear the one I already own with Tried. Or I can buy secondhand, which gets me the jersey without feeding the primary supply chain at all.
Buying with open eyes. You keep your agency, and you vote with your wallet based on how the system actually operates.
Exactly. But looking at the trajectory of all this, it makes me wonder where this ultimately ends up. The brands are pushing physical limits on price, and they are engineering these constant replacement cycles.
Yeah.
If virtual reality watch parties become the standard by the 2030 or 2034 World Cup, are we still going to be paying $150 for physical polyester? Or are these brands just going to charge us $50 for an exclusive digital skin for our avatars, removing the factory and the shipping entirely and keeping a 99% profit margin?
That is a fascinating and highly probable future. The asset, the feeling of belonging, remains exactly the same, but the delivery mechanism becomes purely digital. It would be the ultimate evolution of the licensing model.
Something to think about the next time you tap your card. Did you buy a World Cup 2026 jersey this year? Knowing this breakdown, the factory margins, the duopoly, the massive retail cut, and the $100 million licensing deals, does it change how you feel when you wear it?
We really want to hear your take on this. If you enjoyed this deep dive and if it changed the way you look at your own closet, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss our next exploration. Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read them all, and we would love to hear how you balance being a passionate fan with being an informed consumer.
Let us know. And next time you're standing at the register, remember to look past the price tag. See you next time.